All right, welcome to another episode of the Leadership Download. I'm here with Travis and myself. We're here in our new recording studio. We actually finally had the opportunity to meet in person, so we hope that this in-person content is a little bit more valuable to you and your leadership. So today's topic, we're going to be talking about are you teachable? Travis?
Yeah. So at really the day that the content is going to be centered around this question: Are you teachable? And this question really piggybacks on a previous podcast that we recorded on leadership humility. After we've kind of gone through this process of asking ourselves, do we possess humility? Do we possess that leadership humility that we need? The next question is, are we teachable? Have we positioned ourselves to be teachable? I'm reminded so often of um, just the need to have a teachable mindset. For me personally, almost every successful person I've ever met, I've interacted with, I've asked questions to, they have a deep desire to learn. These are people who are in their 70s and even some in their 80s, and they're still reading books, they're still talking to people, they're still asking questions, and they're still very curious individuals. And they're that way simply because they know the value of what they're going to be to bring to the table is based off of their ability to learn from those around them. So, Cameron, we all each have our own mentors, people that we learn from. What are some of the things that you've done to prepare for a learning session with someone that you look up to?
Yeah, a lot of people that I like being mentored by is people that are way ahead of me, that have had great success, been CEOs, been owner of companies, and a lot of these folks have very limited time. They don't have, they only have a certain amount of time, and when they have that availability, I make sure to do whatever I can to meet with them, fly to them, even in some cases, and actually meet with them. And normally, what I do in order to prepare those for those sessions or those meetings or whatever it is or phone calls is to have take that time for preparation. What is it that I want to achieve? What is my agenda? What is it that I want to get out of this conversation? Because it's not just go out with some drinks and have some dinner.
Yeah.
There's actually an agenda. There's something that I want to get out of it, and there's also something that the mentor wants to get out of it. Like how am I doing? What do I need help in? What areas do I need some clarity in? And maybe that individual or that group of mentors can provide that for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And you may be in a time in your life where you're saying, you know what, I don't really have the opportunity to speak to people, that are a CEO of a company or someone that is of high stature that we can learn from. And I would say that, if that's the case for you, that was the case for both of us as well at many times. And there are many people that we don't have access to in our lives at this point, but yet we do have access through them, through their books, their podcasts, through the content that they produce and put out to the world. So what are some of the things that you can also do is just through reading books. There's been many times that I will have a leadership challenge or something that I'm going through personally, and I'm trying to figure out the decisions I need to make. I will have questions written down as I'm reading the book. You may find a book that's on a specific subject or on a specific area that I'm struggling in. I will have my questions written down so that when I'm reading, it's as if I'm having a conversation with the author. That is, and as I'm reading the book, I'm seeking the information that I need to answer the questions that I have. And one thing that would be very important here is to say, teachability is not much about competence. It's not, and it's not really about mental capacity. It's more about your attitude. And it's really your attitude on your ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn. That's an important process that you will go through as you grow in your careers, in your life. Is do you have the ability to learn something, unlearn something, and relearn something? And we have to have this because the world is changing at a rapid pace. The things that worked in management even 2 years ago don't work now. Why? Because we had a pandemic.
Mhm.
We had all these things happen. We had the Great Resignation. All these things 3 or 4 years ago, we had no idea they were going to exist. So we're now in that process of learning and unlearning and relearning. And if we're unwilling to be there, if we want to be stubborn, we'll never have that ability. I love this quote by Gerald McGinnis. He's the president and CEO of a company called Resoponics. He says, value your listening and reading time roughly 10 times your talking time. This will assure you that you are on course in continuous learning and self-improvement. Or the way John Wooden put it, he says, it's what you learn after you know it all that counts.
Yeah, and another thing is the lifelong growth here is teachability.
Yeah.
Your growth determines who you are, and who you are is who you attract.
Yeah.
Those are the type of people that you're going to attract, and who you attract really determines the success of your organization. And so, to repeat that again, I think these are three key points to hit on.
Yeah.
Is your growth determines who you are, and your level of teachability is, are you a teachable person, or are you resistant or an overconfident that you think you know it all?
Mm.
And oftentimes, we talked about in a previous podcast about humility. It's being the know-it-all doesn't mean you're the best leader. Sometimes it's those individuals that don't have the qualifications, don't have the experience, they don't know. Sometimes those end up being your top leaders and the best leaders out there.
Absolutely.
And who you are is who you attract. Who you are as a leader, as a person, those are the type of people that you'll attract to surround you. And then who you surround yourselves with and who you attract to your organization, that will truly determine the success of your organization, group, church, whatever that looks like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's ask the big question: how do we develop a teachable attitude? That is the big question we want to answer here. Is how do we develop a teachable attitude? And really, the first thing we have to do is we have to move from becoming goal oriented to becoming growth oriented. We want to shift from we want to shift towards growth oriented and away from goal orientation. The reason here is when we have a goal. When we've set a goal, when we finally hit that goal, what often happens is we have a tendency to relax. We've hit the goal, we celebrate, we pop the champagne, and everybody's happy, but then we tend to throttle back. But if we are growth oriented, we appreciate the benchmarks. We're happy. We want to celebrate the wins along the way, but we're happiest. The goal is just to keep going. We want to keep growing. We want to keep getting better. And we don't want goals to limit our ultimate success. I love the way John Maxwell talks about this. He talks about use the 24-hour rule. If you have a major success in your life, celebrate it for 24 hours and move on.
Mm-hmm.
It's old news, right? And if you have a major failure in life, right, then what do? You spend 24 hours kind of sulking in that,
Mm-hmm.
and then you pick yourself up and you move on. One way or another, we have to understand that it's the long game that we want. We want to be growth oriented, not necessarily goal oriented.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes when we talk about becoming growth oriented or goal oriented, with goals, we have this big goal, and once we hit our milestones, we're all like, "Oh, everything is great." But being growth oriented, we want to see growth in ourselves.
Yeah.
That's when you want yourselves to get better, not just hit some goal or benchmark that, start a business or launch this or start this new hobby. It's you find yourself when you are growth oriented, you start developing character, and then you start seeing that in your leadership because you're so growth oriented.
Yeah, absolutely. And and the important part here too is if we become growth oriented, even if we are struggling to move ahead, like maybe there's situations where you set a goal for yourself and you're unable to reach it. The idea here is that we should be growing to our maximum capacity day in, day out, year in, year out, not necessarily reaching a benchmark and then just kind of plateauing out. The second piece here is overcoming our success. We must overcome our success. The greatest obstacle to tomorrow's success is today's success. Oftentimes we we get hung up on our previous successes. For me and for Cameron as well, we reached a certain level of success in our careers very, very early on. And it's very, very easy for me at this point in my life, even though I'm still fairly young, to point back at the successes that I've had in the past. It's very easy for me to kind of kick my feet up and say, I've accomplished some things that some people that are in their 50s and 60s are just getting to. But that's not the desire. We can lose that momentum. We can lose that drive and determination when we're living off of yesterday's successes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's a real shift in mindset. If we, let our successes get to our heads, we're not going to progress.
Yeah.
We're not going to have that growth-oriented mindset that we're talking about. And when we talk about overcome our success, does not mean, oh, we're successful and then we just move on. It's no, you take time to celebrate in whatever way you want to, but then you strive to become better. Okay, I've done this. I've achieved this milestone. And what can I do better? What can I take that to the next level? Because one of the things that in leadership, we should always strive for more. We always strive for more, get better, get ourselves better, challenge us to the next level. Sometimes it's not easy, but it helps you get better in your leadership.
I love the story that I heard about Tiger Woods one day. He was playing golf in a tournament, and he had just I think it was on the second or third day of the tournament. And there was one day left, and he had just played a fantastic round of golf, and he immediately left the golf course and went to the driving range. And one of the reporters asked him, you just played one of your best rounds of golf you've ever played. Now you're back on the driving range playing. Why do you need to do this? Why do you feel that you need to practice so much and get better? And he said, there's a kid somewhere that nobody knows about that is practicing, 15 hours a day, that's going to sneak up on him and become the best. Yeah. He would not allow himself, to be lost in his previous successes. He was always focused on moving forward because he knew that there was somebody else out there that maybe nobody even knew was there yet, that was coming up through the ranks, that was practicing and grinding daily and was going to catch him if he didn't keep his foot on the gas. So success, even in the moment, was not enough. He had to go out there now and get better. He saw the minor mistakes he made and he went out there and got better. He refused to allow his previous success to overcome him. Moving on to the third point really is we want to swear off our shortcuts. If we want to become teachable, we have to swear off shortcuts, and this is something I think the younger generation often it struggles with, and in this millennial generation, we often are looking for the easy way out,
right?
The shortcut. We're looking for the 15-minute ebook. We're looking for the snippet of information. Any way we can cut the work out of what we're doing. Nancy Dornan said it this way: the longest distance between 2 points is a shortcut. At the end of the day, a shortcut normally tends to lead us into a lot more work than we originally planned for.
Yeah, and another one is quit fearing failure, and I think that's something that's really important here. Elber Hubbard said the greatest mistake one can make in life is to be continually fearing you will make one. And I think that's such a good mindset to have, is continually fearing to make a mistake is probably the worst mistake.
Yeah.
I think it's being open to failure, not being afraid to fail, and creating that environment for people to fail. Because I think that's where you really learn as a leader. It's when you fail and you create that room for failure for yourself and not be too hard on yourself. That's what makes you get to the next level. You cannot be prideful and teachable at the same time. Here's another one. The major difference between achieving people and average people is their perception of response to failure.
Yeah, we've talked about this in a previous podcast, but one of the craziest things that we will realize about failure is that 90% of people who fail walk away from it. They go and they hide. They run away from it because they're embarrassed by it. They don't want others to know they failed, and so they leave it. Only 10% of people are actually learning from the mistakes they're making and are actively adjusting and getting better. But guess what? That 10% are your millionaires, your billionaires, your successful people that are running businesses, your successful leaders that are out there doing great things. We have to have the ability to move ourselves from that 90% into that 10%. I've used this quote before, but the Teddy Roosevelt quote that says, he who makes no mistakes makes no progress. Or the John Maxwell quote that says, he who learns from his mistakes makes much progress. If we want to make progress, we have to be comfortable with the failures in our lives. And things are not gonna work out. Things are not gonna go as planned. And we have to be able to make adjustments and keep going.
Yeah, and I really think main reason why is 90% people leave is because that's the easiest route.
Yeah.
That's the easiest route out. Just say goodbye, leave, call it a day, and you're done. The 10% is where these people are learning. You see these billionaires and millionaires that you've mentioned is because they learned. They had failed businesses, they had failed launches, they've made mistakes, but they still stayed in the grind. They continued to learn. They continue to want to take it to the next level. And yeah.
So moving on to number 5 is develop a system for learning and thinking. Here's really the idea behind this. The first thing we need to do is learn to listen. David Thoreau said that this way. He said, it takes two to speak the truth, one to speak and one to hear. Being a good listener helps us to know people better, to learn what they have learned, and to show them that we value them as individuals. Really, that first step of developing that teachability is our ability to learn to listen. And then moving into that second step is understand the learning process. And I think there's some things that we could spend some time here learning. Is learning typically works this way: we act, we look for the mistakes, and we evaluate. We search for better ways, and then we go back to act. It's going back to that learn, relearn, learn, unlearn, relearn, learn, unlearn, relearn. This is a process we're going to be going through for our whole lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so true. And then the next one is look for and plan teachable moments. If you look for opportunities to learn in every situation, you'll expand your talent to its true potential. And if we don't plan these teachable moments, it's so important to seek out and actively plan these moments. You do that in different ways. You do that by listening to podcasts, reading books, attending leadership conferences, or going to things that where new experiences that you maybe it's an area that you just want to learn in. You've always had an interest in, and that's the way you plan for these teachable moments.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important. And when we have those teachable moments, we should always be looking for them, and they can come from some of the most unusual places. I have so many teachable moments that just pop up from a day in the life of being a father. Things that happen, things my children say, things that are exposed by the stress of being a parent. Don't dismiss those things. Lean into those things and utilize them as teachable moments. But also, when we have those teachable moments, make them count. Utilize those opportunities. I can remember one of the biggest disappointments for me ever in my life was one of the first times I went to a leadership conference, and I was in a Q&A session, and I was just sitting there listening, and I had a question, but I was too enamored. I was just too nervous. I didn't feel like my question was gonna to equal up to the stature of the people in the room. And I decided to go away, and I didn't ask the question, and I didn't utilize the moment. I didn't take that opportunity, that teachable moment that was in front of me, and utilize it. And so we want to make sure that we are taking advantage of those times. And really also when on the other side of that, we're taking the time to reflect on what's been given to us and make sure that we have, really kind of taken advantage of the learning and the growth opportunity we've been given. And number 5, and finally, is really we want to ask ourselves as are we teachable? I mean, this is a very simple question. All 5 steps here we've gone through so far. really unpacks this idea of, things that we can do to become teachable, but simply asking ourselves, are we teachable, really helps us reflect. Here's some questions, that we can ask to understand, are we teachable, is, am I open to others' ideas? Do I listen more than I talk? Am I open to changing my opinion based on new information? Do I readily admit when I'm wrong? Do I observe before acting on a situation? Do I ask questions? Am I willing to ask a question that will expose my ignorance? And see, that's why I was fearful of that day. I was afraid I was going to ask a
Mhm.
question that made me look ignorant. Am I open to doing things in a way I haven't done them before? Am I willing to ask for directions? And do I act defensive when criticized, or do I listen openly for truth? These are huge questions we can ask ourselves. That's a point right there where it would almost be worth going back and rewinding this video and going back and listening to these questions again. If you don't get anything else out of this teaching today, is going back and asking these questions. And if any of these areas pop, kind of, show a red flag in your life, this is where you want to start leaning into finding ways to grow in these things. For me, it's always been since then that I refuse. If I have a question and I'm in a room where I have an opportunity to learn, I force myself to say, I will not leave this room until I've asked my question.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, some of these questions that you've asked here, Travis, is, do I listen more than I can talk? Do I act defensive when criticized, or do I listen openly for truth? It's really talking about listening.
yeah,
And sometimes I think in leadership, we forget to listen sometimes. We're so focused on what we have to say, what we want to say to our team, setting out the right message, or distributing information, is sometimes we forget to listen. I forget who said this, but they say having a good practice of keeping your mouth closed, both ears open. And I think that's such a good practice for us as leaders to become into this posture of we call teachability, is to listen.
yeah, absolutely. So take that opportunity, review those 10 questions, and start to dig into, where do you need to work on to become more teachable? I think this is a step in the right direction. If you're listening to this podcast, you're moving in the right direction. But what are you doing with the information that's being given to you? Are you allowing this information to soak in? Are you allowing these new facts that are maybe being introduced into your life for the first time, these new values to be passed into your life? Are you just listening? Are you allowing them to potentially change the way you think about things? I think these are critical things for us moving forward as leaders, as we kind of continue to lean into self leadership. It's very important to understand that even if you're not leading anyone at this moment, each of us have the responsibility of leading ourselves well first, because no one wants to follow a leader who doesn't have the ability to lead themselves well. So anyone can start there. So, final thoughts?
No, I think it's developing that teachable attitude is so critical. If you don't have that teachable attitude, you're not going to grow. You're not going to grow as a person. You're not going to grow in your leadership. And this is something that it's important to continue learning.
Yeah.
You never can stop learning. Like one of the things for myself is like, going through school is never going to finish for me. Like I always want to continue to learn different things, get better at different areas of life, and continue to take it to that next level. Because we never want to stay comfortable.
Yeah.
If we're comfortable where we are, then that means we're not doing something right. We always want to stay in the uncomfortable, continue to push ourselves to go to that next level.
Yeah, absolutely. So we thank you guys so much for joining us on another episode of the Leadership Download. If you enjoy this content, please share, like, whatever is appropriate for the platform you're watching on. And we really thank you and value your time, and we thank you for trusting us with your time. And we'll see you guys on the next podcast.